With the 1-year anniversary of Honkai Star Rail soon to arrive next month, I'm sure many of us in the community have been reflecting on the maiden voyage of Hoyo's new game. Needless to say, it was a very profound journey, serving as a highlight of most people's 2023 gaming experience. I would assume so, given that it won the Best Mobile Game Award for that year. Now, the breadth of gameplay options and quality of life present within Star Rail has been a major source of debate, especially when compared to its predecessor, from which a good number of its features were derived. And while I firmly believe that in regards to execution, despite having more bare-bones gameplay, Honkai Star Rail definitely accommodates to player needs and wants more generously, there is and always will be room for improvement. So for today, I want to make a video on 10 things Honkai Star Rail desperately needs. I say desperately, it's not of utmost urgency, but I do believe the game would be better off if it had these things. We're going to divide this into two categories, 5 things from a mechanical standpoint and 5 things from a gameplay/content standpoint. Let's get right into it. First and foremost mechanic that I think needs to be implemented is the ability to cancel your ultimate. I get that being quick play spells, you can cut through the battle's turn order at literally any point in time, which can be kind of weird for you to use ultimates as a sort of timeout, especially when using it in between enemy combo attacks, but I speak for most of us when I say that many times I've accidentally used an ultimate without realizing I should have done something else first, such as using Huohuo's ultimate to power up my Jingliu before using Fushuan's ultimate, which meant I'd be missing out on that last bit of extra energy for Fushuan. I understand this sounds extremely min-max, but come on, I can't be the only one who fat-fingered an ultimate or accidentally used Blade's ultimate without realizing his passive was about to go off or using Jingyuan's ult even though he was already 10 stacked. Planning moves ahead of time is a core part of Star Rail's experience, but having the ability to cancel an ultimate would be nice to have as the likelihood of mistakenly using one is pretty high. Number 2 will be auto battle customization. To be fair, the AI for Star Rail is not the worst I've seen. For example, I find that it's pretty good with Sela, using a skill after it gets a resurgence buff or conserving SP by basic attacking if it's sufficient enough to kill an enemy. Though then again, it's pretty easy to create a semi-coherent auto battle protocol for a turn-based game. The same can't be said for Azure Lane's auto battle, Jesus Christ. That being said, for characters with slightly more layered or nuanced gameplay involving specific timing, the auto battle system doesn't do a very good job at optimizing, and besides, having a one-size-fits-all AI doesn't lend itself to every character, so I think what would be cool to have is the ability to customize the playstyle you want the AI to have. For the sake of not bending the devs over backward to satisfy this one tiny nitpick, instead of giving us the ability to task the game, they can let us choose from a number of presets, like prioritizing SP for healing for fights with a lot of burst damage or conserving SP, things of that nature. Alternatively, they could do a threshold-based thing where healers would only use SP to heal if they detect a party member dropping below an adjustable amount of health. For simplicity's sake, we could just do aggressive, as in burning ults and SP whenever possible, normal, and conservative. I know there's not much incentive to expand on the auto battle system, as Hoyo probably wants players to actually play the game, not treat it as an idle one, but if they're going to include the feature, they might as well round it out. Next feature I think would be good is a post-battle breakdown. Many gacha games have some kind of post-battle analysis for the player that showcases the performance of each party member, ranging from rudimentary stats such as damage and healing to more elaborate measurements like amount of damage taken, how many resources they used, stuff like that. The majority of the player base couldn't care less about numbers, but for hardcore players or math geeks who want to optimize their gameplay, post-battle breakdowns can serve as a reference point for what they can improve on and how they can maximize their character's efficiencies. They already sort of have this implemented by listing the total amount of damage dealt in any given instance, but being allowed to see a stat board showing basic stuff like damage per turn, HP lost and restored, etc. would be very helpful. You can't really implement this in a game like Genshin since the open world nature of it makes tracking things more difficult, but it can most definitely be achieved in a turn-based game like Star Rail. In fact, turn-based games are the easiest to design a post-battle analysis, so this would be another quality of life feature that would be awesome to have. The next one's kind of a minor nitpick, but one that always bothered me whenever I come across it. You know how in Calyx you can queue up anywhere between 1 to 6 clears, right? So you don't have to go through the tedium of getting your rewards, then running back to the key to reactivate the domain like we have to in Genshin. That's all well and good, but let's say you queue up to do 6 clears and you have only 100 Trailblaze power. This requires you to exit the Calyx and re-enter to readjust the clear queue from 6 to 4 to get that last 40 taken care of. It would be nice to have the ability to adjust that amount in the post-battle results. You could technically circumvent this by taking your existing supply of energy and choosing a number of attempts that it can be divisible by, in this case dividing 100 Trailblaze power across 5 rounds of 2 clears, but that still gets tedious. Calyxes are auto-battled through anyway, or rather than letting us readjust how many clears we want, have it so we can do more than 6 and queue up like a total of 20 clears. That would solve the entire problem altogether. Okay, you knew this was coming. Listen, Honkai Star Rail's dialogue is nowhere near as verbose as Genshin's, but that doesn't stop it from being tedious anyway. The main story is interesting enough to where I have no problem listening through all of it, but the one area where I wish I could skip everything are events. Star flagship events are extremely long, easily double or triple the size of one of Genshin's. Accounting for this, they give us a generous time frame to complete it, usually the span of the entire version, which amounts to over a month, with the expectation that the player goes through bits and pieces of it and not all in one sitting. But being the professional procrastinator that I am, I often binge the entire event within a couple days, usually right before it ends. Here's where it becomes a problem though. There's a copious amount of unvoiced dialogue and cutscenes in those events, none of which are instructive and therefore can ultimately be skipped. Not being able to unnecessarily elongates the time it takes to clear the event. So while Star Rail's dialogue is less tiresome, it would still be nice to skip cutscenes, at least for non-essential unvoiced parts. Okay, so now that we're done with the 5 mechanical changes I want, let's talk about the 5 content changes, beginning with a rather controversial one. I got a lot of flack over my video criticizing how almost mind-numbingly simple Star Rail's combat is, and though I concede that new units come with enough gameplay quirks and personalities to spice up combat, the fact that you only have 3 options to choose from, attack, skill, and ultimate, painfully restricts Honkai Star Rail's combat to this day, especially considering it's a turn-based game. Having grown up with turn-based RPGs all my life, I've seen just how creative and nuanced this seemingly bland genre can be, from the use of action commands in games like Paper Mario and Mario & Luigi, to customizable movesets in Pokemon, to real-time turn-based hybrids like Xenoblade, and to traditional old-fashioned combat like Octopath. Seeing how overly simplified Star Rail's combat is comes off as wasted potential to me. I'm aware that's the premise of Star Rail. Its simplicity is what makes it digestible to a broad audience, but you can definitely add a few more things without compromising on that. For example, the ability to use items mid-battle. We have a ton of consumables that apply to combat, such as the ones that increase elemental damage, or potions that can refill the energy of a unit. The only problem is that I forget these are even in the game because I never get a chance to use them. Anticipating the inevitable being able to use items in combat would kill the balance, we can always implement a cooldown or something, wherein you can only use one item every 3 turn cycles or something. This would be impactful enough without diminishing the value of characters, and of course for endgame purposes we can disable the use of items for stuff like MLC 12 or difficulty 5 Swarm. Beyond items, having more things to do would be great. Even something like a guard action would be very nice to have. Since there's no micromechanical expression in turn-based games, the main experience comes from decision making, what moves to use and when. Star Rail has a ton of decision making to do pre-battle, but not so much in the battle. For games with an extensive selection of choices, it can lead to extremely fun and replayable gameplay. Star Rail doesn't really overwhelm you with choices, which has me concerned for the long-term playability of the game. Whatever form it takes, it would be in the game's best interest to add more layers of combat through more actions or, I don't know, maybe an extra skill given to every character. Next one will be boss raids. This is mostly my personal preference, but I'm a huge fan of games that have guild raids or something along the lines of that, where there's this huge boss with a ton of health, and everyone in the guild is given like 3 attempts a day to try to deal as much damage contribution as possible, and if they successfully take it out before the event period ends, they get rewards. Hear me out, yes, this can make the game extremely pay to win, especially if the rewards are needed for progression, and guilds might gatekeep players who don't bring enough DPS or have a stacked enough account. Implementing a feature like this can be detrimental to the game's combat, so it needs to be handled carefully. That being said, while we have the option to use friend units, without co-op play, there's almost no semblance of multiplayer whatsoever in this game. Naturally, it wouldn't be possible to do co-op in Star Rail, as there's almost nothing to explore in the overworld, and battles are composed of instances, not real-time combat. This could be the next best thing, something for players to cooperate on and take out. To prevent the possibility of boss raids becoming a pay-to-win grind with all the whale guilds hogging the top spots, they can make it so the rewards for top placement clears are strictly vanity, like a trophy that just sits in your inventory. Star Rail has no shortage of endgame content, so I'm not suggesting this for that purpose. It's more that I would like something that encourages players working together, and a boss raid event every week seems like a good way to go about it. Moving on, I wasn't sure if this should go in content or mechanical because it's kind of both, but let's make one thing very clear. Honkai Star Rail's Relic system is absolute dog shit. You can hear more about this in the video I made on it a few weeks ago, but basically the main gripe I and almost all of us have with relics is the inability to off-piece, forcing you to get 6 out of 6 relics without any compromise. There's an item called the self-modeling resin, which allows you to choose the main stat of a relic when crafting it. And while that is nice to have, oftentimes it's not the main stat that's annoying, but the substat. I think the self-modeling resin needs to be reworked. Instead of letting you choose a main stat, it should let you choose one of the 4 substat lines and re-roll it to something else. That in my opinion would be a far better function than choosing main stat. Heaven knows how many times you get the main stat you want but garbage subs. Obviously if they would make this change, the self-modeling resin would have to be more accessible. Giving only 1 a month is not going to cut it. We need something like 1 or 2 a week, or even 3, considering how abysmal RNG re-rolling can be. Even so, I would much rather have the ability to reroll a substat that I don't want into one that I potentially do, rather than choose the main stat of a relic only for it to be dead on arrival. While we're on that, the relic system needs to be made less costly. Having to exchange 10 relics to synthesize 1 is an awful conversion rate, even if we have the privilege of choosing one specific part we want. Considering there's no room for an off piece, I think instead of 10 it should go to 5, where it's still more expensive than Genshin's 3 to 1, but again it's made up for by letting us choose the part we want. I've been playing since the day the game came out and I still have not finished my Sela. This next one might not be possible in light of the aforementioned oversimplicity of Star Rail's combat, but I would like to have more challenge-based content. As it stands, across Memory of Chaos, Sworn Disaster, and Pure Fiction, despite having those special buffs that encourage a specific playstyle or team, all of these dungeons effectively boil down to DPS races, how fast you can deal damage and how much you can deal. The only additional input is whether you want to do it with X option or Y option. Technically speaking, all turn-based RPGs devolve into dealing as much damage as possible, but again, it's the planning of moves that make the genre so enjoyable. One of my favorite titles for the GameCube was Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. In the game, they had a series of simulated battles known as Battle CDs, wherein you had to successfully take out all of the enemy's Pokemon with a predetermined lineup and a set amount of turns, usually requiring you to think outside the box or manipulate the opponent into doing something for you to then punish. Considering the majority of us brute force through Pokemon with high damaging moves, it was a refreshing way to look at the game. Star Rail would do well to have challenges like these. Granted, unlike Pokemon where you can get all the units for free, in Star Rail you have to buy them, so players don't have that luxury to try all kinds of different scenarios with different units. But then again, we usually get trial units, so I don't see a problem with this at all. Having special challenges to spice up combat would alleviate the monotony of it sometimes. For example, you can have a special NPC that enemies would target and you would have to protect them using shields, heals, or crowd control. That could be a fun way to make use of characters that would otherwise not be used, which is fitting considering I made a video on Welt a couple weeks ago. He would be excellent for this kind of challenge. Don't get me wrong, I do enjoy the variety we have across MOC, Swarm, and Pure Fiction. I just think having more than just kill things fast would make the game more enjoyable and ultimately maintain longevity. Last one isn't really gameplay, but definitely something that piqued my interest. Replayable story. I for one have a particular reason for wanting to replay the story. In contrast to Genshin, where Aether and Lumine's dialogue choices don't exactly differ from one to another in tone, Calyx and Stella's dialogue choices are far more entertaining. Like an NPC walks up to you and calls you the savior of the world, how can we ever repay you? Your dialogue choices can range from something humble, like it was only thanks to the help of all my friends, to something douchebaggy like I want 30 bad bitches, some Cheetos, and... The end result is still the same, but I always wanted to go through each dialogue option to see the different responses I get. Star Rail's dialogue is so unhinged sometimes, actually all the time, it genuinely makes me want to replay the story again in a trivial sort of Undertale pacifist versus Undertale genocide kind of way. I kinda like that the MCs in Star Rail are really bland and grey in appearance compared to the more bubbly, colorful looks of the other characters. It makes any personality you give them seem plausible. And I wish I could manually play through the cutscenes and try on all the choices rather than having to watch a YouTube video to see the differences. To prevent players from abusing this, obviously no additional rewards will be given for replaying the story. It's just for fun. I can have my MC be a noble, virtuous hero one day and a trash-diving goblin the next. Oh, and as a final bonus thing, can we please have more than one ultimate voice line? I swear to god, if I hear about disappearing among a sea of butterflies one more time, I might actually disappear among a sea of butterflies. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today. What do you guys think of my choices? Do you agree with them, or do you think there are other more pressing things that need to be changed or added? Let me know in the comments down below. For now, if you enjoyed the video, I encourage you to leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Honkai Star Rail videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.